Welcome, everybody. Welcome, you beautiful and amazing poets who are spending your, what day is this? Thursday evening with us to talk about understanding tone and voice. How are you guys doing tonight?
We are doing fine. Fine. Fine.
Colleen might be cracking up just a little
I
bit.
He's is at his end. It's like on a thread with this heat.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard a rumor that it's pretty hot in New York right now.
Mhm.
So
Pumpkin
you know
pie.
what? We can call you a hottie then, right?
There you go.
But
You're a hottie. Ah, it's the Stevie tone of voice that we're going for.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, speaking of tone, I will read real quick and if you are looking for the notes, they are in the description. You can just download them for today's class. Uh, Understanding tone, poetic tone refers to the attitude, emotion, or mood that a poet conveys in their writing. It sets the emotional atmosphere of the poem and influences how the reader perceives and interprets the poem's content. Just like a person's tone of voice in conversation can convey different emotions or attitudes, the tone in poetry does the same, but through the use of language, imagery, and literary devices. And one thing I always find interesting about tone is it is not the mood. The tone is what the poet is putting on it, but it's not necessarily what the emotion or the mood that the reader. Wow, well, this is going to be a good night. The reader receives. So you can have a dark tone on something, but where that might put a lot of people, or the poet might expect that that will put people in a somber mood. I really like that kind of tone, and that kind of thing makes me cheerful. So you could have a really dreary kind of story or a dreary tone, but I will find that very refreshing and cheerful. So it's not what the reader is receiving, but what the poet is intending is what we're talking about as far as tone. What do you guys think? You can completely contradict me.
I was going to contradict you. I was going to say that tone is mood, but again, in anything
Yeah.
we write, we put in what we intend, but
Mm-hmm.
that not be what the reader receives. So in that
Right.
sense,
That's what I
yes,
mean. It
that's
is
true.
mood, but it's the writer's mood that we're talking about with tone, not the
It, also,
reader's mood.
it kind of reflects who the writer is in a certain way as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like a reflection of who you are, your internal rhythm and internal voice, basically.
Exactly.
It's almost like a signature or an identity in a sense, a fragment of an identity or something. I would say.
Until we can put on the little microchips and the drugs into people, we can't control their moods. Nevermore. Nevermore.
Sorry, I was off on a mental tangent of probably a horror tangent of how we could control people's moods. But
It's a good
anyways, each of us have some poetry to read today to talk about a tone in that poem, and then we can kind of go from there. And then remember, questions welcome in chat, and welcome everybody. And yeah, I'm ready. Like, who wants to read first?
I could start it off. I'm
Okay.
down.
All
I
right.
could. I'll let you want
Jamal
to
wants
do
to read before he passes out from the heat.
a. This one is going to explore on romantic tone, which is a tone that's associated with love, passion, or idealism, basically. Um, so this one I call her name. This is going to be like the softest thing you ever hear me read in my life. Her name. She is bioluminescent with the gifts of morning, transforming her rainbow mean to nourishing life. She says it tastes like sunlight. It feels a moon. She says soon we can be Earth's treasure. I place her symbols of rose and jasmine, of lotus with male seed, on fertility's altar. She bleeds with the promise to give, guarding the gate where futures live. Sometimes I despise her to hide the suffering of my pride. I have nothing to provide that she needs. Though I build and build, she builds the builders. Though I fight and war, she restores. The sublime moment of my undoing is in her choosing. In her arms I am tasted, weighed and measured, desired and pleasured. A new world so deep inside, liberated from the graveyard of my boyish pride. She doesn't need to kill, but does so in her own way, turning a house into a home, potential into a meal, power into strength, a hope into something real. I sing the songs. I am the warmth beside her. I'll be her protector and provider. Heaven knows Eden will never be the same. Woman is her name.
I think New York just heated up a few degrees.
It's Jamal's fault.
Sorry, I have to let a dog in. Why are you scratching at the door? Tell us about the tone and everything that you use. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I wanted to use more like a romantic tone, idealistic tone. So the tone is called romantic. It's like a romantic tone. And it kind of weighs more on like idealism. It's definitely heavy on the perspective of a person that's, I guess you would say, has from rose-colored glasses. However you want to phrase it. But I think that tone is something where you kind of tap into your passion and your idealism, and it's not necessarily has to be rooted in the reality of the person or the object of your desire. It's more about your feelings about that thing, that person, in case in the ideal. That's why I would say like the romantic tone is like.
I like that. Diane West gives you some applause from the chat. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then going on the how it's like, I typically don't like romance kind of things, though I do really like this poem that you just read.
Unless there's like a bleeding heart in your hand at the same time.
Right. Like somebody dies for their romance, the musket at her
Exactly.
chest, kind of thing. But
Yes.
I really did like that. But that's again like that whole, you're creating the tone and the mood of the piece, but the reader's responsibility might be, or not responsibility, but they might have a different reaction. But I think
And there's
that
also like a
that was
hint
very
of
good.
danger. It's like a hint of danger in it that I try to put in there. And like
Mhm.
Pixie really picked up on it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like what you're saying about, mutually, assured destruction of intimacy. It's in there because there's always a to all passion. There's a possessiveness in there that I try to also
Mhm.
put in there. Like there's like almost like want to own or possess something, and that's why you can
Mhm.
see where it goes dark and why it goes dark in the future. You- you-
Yeah.
you- so I'm trying to have like hints of that too, but predominantly it's as romantic as I could be.
I like it. Well, and it also creates that threat of this will end. You can kind of feel that in there. This is beautiful and painful and poignant because it could end at any time. All right, well done. So we have some romantic tone going on over here from the hot New Yorker. How about you, Colleen, the hot Canadian? Because
From the
everybody's
cool
hot but me
from
right
cool
now.
Canada. Well, not that cool. I'm going to read from one of the gods of writing, Ursula Le Guin. There we go, Ursula Le Guin. And this poem I used to be able to recite in its whole. It's called
Wow.
The Crown of Laurel. So I'm going to read it first, and we can talk about the tone. It's a somewhat long, but here we go. He liked to feel my fingers in his hair, so he pulled them off me, wove a wreath of them, and wears it at parades and contests. My dying fingers with their kitchen smell interlocked around his sunny curls. Sometimes he rests on me a while. Aside from that, he seems to have lost interest. It wasn't to preserve my virtue that I ran. What's a nymph like me to do with something that belongs to men? It's just I wasn't in the mood, and he didn't care. It scared me.
Wow.
The little goat leg boys can't even talk, but still they wait till they can smell you feel like humping with a goat leg in the woods. Rolling and scratching and laughing. They can laugh. Poor little hairy cocks. I miss them. When we were tired of that kind of thing, my sister nymphs and I would lie around and talk and tease and stroke and chase and stretch out panting for another talk and sleep in the warm shadows side by side under the leaves. and all was as we pleased. And then the mortal hunters of the deer, the poachers, the deciduous shepherd boys, they'd stop and gape and stare with owly eyes, not even hoping, even when I smiled. Knew every spring like daffodils, those boys. But once, for 40 years, I met one man upon the sheep-cropped hills of Arcady. I kissed his wrinkles, the ravines of time I cannot enter, gazing in his eyes, whose dark dimmed and deepened, seeing less always till he died. I came to his burial. Among the villagers, I walked behind his gray-haired wife. She could have been Time's wife, my grandmother. And then there were my brothers of the streams. Oh, my river lovers with their silver tongues, so sweet to thirst, the cool, prolonged delight of a river moving in me, of his flow and flow and flow. They send to my roots their kindness, even now, and slowly I drink it from my mother's hands. So that was all I knew until he came, hard, bright, burning, dry, intent. One will instead of wantings meeting, no center but himself, the sun, a god. Is like that, I suppose. He has to be. But I never asked to meet a god, let alone make love with one. Why did he think I wanted to? And when I told him no, what harm did he think it did him? It can be hard to find a girl agape to love a big blonde blue-eyed god. He said, so said, you're all alike. He's seen us all, he knows, so why me? I guess that maybe it was time for me to give up going naked and get dressed. And it took a god to make me do it. Mother never could. So I put on my brown ribbed stockings and my underwear of silky cambium and my green dress, and I became my clothing, being what I wear. I run no more. The winds dance me. My sister, seamstress, sovereign, comes up from the dark below the roots to mend my clothes in April. And I stand in my green patience in the winter rains. He honors me, he says, to wear my fingers turning brown and brittle, clenched in the bright hair of his head. He sings. My silence crowns that song. I love that poem so much. So obviously that poem is about, there's eroticism. That tone is one of, I'd say, nostalgia and what's missed. And it has very much this flow of like a kind of like the rhythmic aspect of the earth, the water, the rivers. And, to me, that tone overall was that sense of the wonder of nature and then that loss of it. What do you guys think?
I agree with all of that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I feel like it was very melancholy, like had a melancholy tone to it, like a feeling of sadness, gloom, depression beneath all of that. Like I felt very sad,
Yeah.
Loss. Some intense loss there. What you're giving up and what are you gaining, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Sacrifice.
yes, yeah.
So
So it's very melancholy to me, the tone of it overall, like beauty,
Yeah.
but mixed with sadness and loss.
Yeah, and Ursula Le Guin, she understood language so well. She was definitely a master.
yeah, Pixie says gutted.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is, excuse me, we did not talk about what poems we were going to read before this. We just kind of literally like 30 seconds before we went live, we were like, oh, we should all read a poem to talk about the tone. Mine also has to do with sex and passion, but in a completely different way. It's weird that we all three, because these are not typical topics that each of us probably Colleen more than any of us. But it's just interesting that all three of these mirrored. That's really was meant to be, people. Hey, poetry about sex was meant to be today. I'm going to read out of Weird Tales, the last issue, which is number 367. And my poem is also about sex, but my tone is scientific and cold.
Scientific sex.
Yeah, pretty much. And distant.
The ins and outs of sex.
I will withhold the joke that just almost came out of my mouth. And behave. All right. This is called Lost Generations. And look at it. They did like the whole universe thing. Nice layout. But anyways. Lost Generations. Never to be old, sons, daughters of Hyades, falling stars falling like rain, destined to be seed, planting ourselves, galaxies between galaxies, DNA clocks timed to resurrect us. We were the sleeping beauties, sabotaged awake. We stood naked, glistening, shivering clusters of blank innocence, eyes shining in the abyss, programmed desires colliding with our biological purpose, the procreators. A ship of Adam and Eve's intended to spread the mission of man, oblivious to gravitational collapse pulling us forward. We culminated as celestial bodies, defragmenting gasps, evaporating at the event horizon, orgasmic spasms of hope for mankind, devoured by a black hole, lost generations. So again, that say almost the same topic, talking about passion and physical love, but completely different tone. I was really trying to put a distance there, and
And
almost
you get
test
the
tube it.
coldness.
Mhm.
Yeah, the coldness of space. Like there, I
Yeah.
feel that coldness, and I do feel that vast distance in it.
Yeah, the futility of love and all of those things. So,
Oh,
I think
you
you
are
muted.
muted.
You muted yourself.
It's just a wide, cold abyss.
Mhm.
Love is an abyss. Once you fall in, you can never get out.
Yeah. So it was so interesting to me that we chose such similar topics to
It's
read.
almost like it went from the beginning to the end in space. Like it was this whole transition, and the transition from like magical realism to
Mhm.
science fiction. This whole, I don't know. It's very anthology-ish.
Yeah. So well, that was meant to be because that was completely 30 seconds of preparation. We all kind of were like, because of course we all have poetry books sitting around, so it was a very much. But yeah, I think that was a good demonstration of tone, guys. I couldn't have planned it better.
I, I have a horror tone. I have one more, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
It's
No,
really short.
read it.
It's really short. I just wanted to give something more. I don't know how good it is, but it's short. It's called Transit Zombies, and obviously it's about the New York City subway system. Transit Zombies. The streaking centipede of wheels roars sparks, spitting out walking bones. We offer our flesh, seated on warm tongues, in the acidic gut of miserable faces, ear to ear, eyes in all directions. The very soul feels crowded, the nostrils full, ears hear, none listen. By the time we get to where we're going, we're no longer ourselves, eviscerating toxic juices from a million invasive moves. Six sets of 54-inch wide mouths slide open, regurgitating our exit. A joyless mass of walking bones, ready to zombie the day.
I like it. I like it. So yeah, again, not about. What could be about? It depends on how you
Well,
interpret it. I'm kidding.
Could be about sex, you know.
It's talking about the New York subway. I mean, so yeah, completely different tone there. Which
Yeah.
which kind of leads me to the first thing to discuss, which we've kind of done this. How do we define tone in poetry? And how does it contribute to the overall meaning of the poem? And the overall meaning is kind of where I want to go. Each of the poems read, the differing tone kind of added to the meaning of the whole thing. Using the cold distance of space, or the more moving.
That's funny.
Are you talking about the mermaid? The mermaid and the
It just climbed up my desk. It like the tone.
The spider.
oh, a spider. That's so funny. I actually didn't read the comment yet. I just shared it. So.
Just put it up there. I think Diane's removing the spider.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So speaking of spiders, we had one that was like, it was like this big in the dog water dish the other day.
Was it the dreaded banana spider?
No, thank goodness. It would have been a way different story. We put it out the window. If it had been the banana spider, we probably would have just kind of held it down for a while or something.
They're deadly.
Yeah, they are deadly. I don't like to kill spiders, but when they can kill me, I kind of feel like it's a thing. But yeah, go into the overall, how the tones affect the overall meanings. That's one reason why tone is such an effective tool and why we should be using it, because it does, like all the 3 poems that we read that were specifically about basically sex, all had 3 completely different feelings and outcomes, probably for the reader, but also, for the writer communicating.
I'd like to be down by the sea in an octopus's garden, nipping your toes. Nevermore, nevermore, nevermore. Annabelle Lee, get it back to the sea.
So Colleen is going to do, Jamal and I are leaving, and Colleen is just going to finish the rest of the class with the puppet show.
I like to sing. I like to sing the sailor sing.
I think, all right,
Spiders.
we are taking a detour. I happen to love spiders. So Joros they're like an orb weaver, I think, aren't they, Pixie?
Oh. And 7, what?
Tarantulas inside.
She has 30 churros and 7, yeah.
I'm presuming the tarantulas are pets.
We probably have 7 tarantulas in here, but
maybe we're the pets.
That's very possible. Well, that's true when it comes to cats. We are the pets.
Yeah.
Cats rule.
And dogs. And dogs can also be like that. All right. Are there any, going back to the actual class, are there any specific poetic devices that you guys find particularly effective in conveying tone? And do you want to give an example of how they work?
I don't know if I didn't prepare that.
We're still talking about spiders.
I definitely use metaphor like a lot in my sort of tone. I think it fits in the tone. Like in the last one I read, Transit Zombies, the whole thing is basically using metaphors of digestion, kind of like losing yourself, having yourself digested to give you that feeling of how it feels to be in a crowded New York City subway where you kind of wake up early and you're so excited to start the day, and then once you get off that train, you're just back in the zombie mode.
Yeah.
So, some of that would be like, we off our flesh, see the Lord.
Sorry, that was a giant vehicle going by, moving everybody. Kind of like
I was doing so well.
I know.
I was doing so engaged.
Well, go ahead, rewind. We'll go back to what got.
No, I lost my moment. No.
Fire's on.
I think like the words and alliteration also play a part, like, short, sharp, shock kind of things. You've got the hard words, the onomatopoeic vroom. Wait a minute. Why is there an ogre in here?
I actually know that ogre. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, it would.
So yeah, I think that's part of like having words that have that assonance in them, long, flowy words, if you're trying to get across that kind of mood. In Ursula Le Guin's poem, there was a lot of rhythm in the way the words came out. And, I think that kind of helped build that memory, that kind of sweet reminiscence with that kind of melancholy.
Yeah,
And I would say I'd use that.
Yeah, and I feel like it added an innocence to it too, like a sense of lightness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to use a lot of like rhythm and euphony, like I think in her name, I try to use a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
Just so it's like very musical, and how it flows, very flowy, very musical, like a
Yeah.
song or dance.
A trick that I use if I'm doing something that is like science fictiony, I will actually call up a science thesaurus, and so I'll just go through and I'll find words that could have a double meaning to what I want to write. So if I want to say teenagers are having sex on a ship and they're going to orgasm and then get sucked into a black hole, which is basically the line, that's the plot of that poem. But then I'll look through and I'll pick out words like event horizon, and what is an event horizon? At that moment, that could be described as an event horizon, and then I'll try to put the science with my meaning, but have just words that you would never normally use for something like that. And so I think of it as kind of a cheaty thing, but it does give the language that I'm not a scientist. Half of the terms I have to go look up the definition. What is that, anyways? Oh, okay, yeah, that could be this. And so that's another way to put in tone, is just to go steal those words from not another language, but in a way it is another language.
It totally clips at the heart.
Yeah.
Kind of using the ordinary to describe the extraordinary, or the extraordinary to describe the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense.
Yeah. To work with tone and things like that. Yeah. The rhythmic pose. Rhythmic, I said, but yeah, and also rhythmic.
And you're rhythmic.
I feel like we're just getting sillier now. I think it's the heat, you guys.
It's pretty intense out here.
Yeah. Well, as poets, how do you go about experimenting with different various tones in your own work to express different emotions or messages, do you think? And how do you strike a balance between shifts in tone and maintaining coherence? Like, obviously, if I went and used too many scientific words, stole too many, you're probably not going to be able to understand what is even happening in the poem. So you have to find that balance. How about you guys?
Yeah, and it's being very conscious of the words. Like the Anglo-Saxon poem I tried, which has like two pieces, like joyously he jumped through the tunnel. It's like, because you have to have two words that have that alliterative aspect in the first clause of the line. And with that, like also with that Anglo-Saxon verse, was that they wouldn't say, he picked up a spear. It would be like, it would be like the Soul Thunderer or something like that. Like there would be those names that would be describing what it did. Like the Soul Thunderer might be a hammer, or the Head Crusher. It wouldn't be, you wouldn't say hammer, you would say Head Crusher or something like that. So those different tones. He picked up a hammer. He picked up the Head Crusher. You get a sense of tone. If a hammer is a hammer, it could be a poem about a carpenter, but a head crusher is going to, and that's not very good, but it gives you right away a sense of what type of poem it may be as well.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jamal?
Yeah, I mean, mine's is just more basic. I'm not as elaborate as Miss Colleen Anderson, but
with her finger puppets.
But me.
We are formally dressed always.
I just basically try to find the words that match the feeling that I'm going for in the tone. So like like rainbow mean. These are words that I never use because I write a certain type of poem, usually in the horror, science fiction, or genre space. So when I was writing, for instance, her name, I had to look for like language that made me feel softer emotions or idealized emotions, and then that's what I use in it to help serve the tone to translate a lot of feeling in just like a stanza or a few words. So
That's actually a perfect segue, Jamal, into my next question. Which you said that, and I'm like, perfect. It's like we planned all this.
It's like
The
just
next
adult mind.
fate is planning this for us. My next question was, are there any challenges you encounter when trying to convey a specific tone, and how do you overcome them? And I was actually going to bring up wine. I've seen you write poetry, Colleen, with the wine.
It's true. I do it often.
But I was going to say, because I tend to write dark and horror and things like that, and when I am trying to write something happier, it tends to always spin that way. So that's one of my challenges, is if I am trying to write a poem that is not going to make you depressed and sad, then I really have to work hard at finding those words.
But then that kind of leads into from tone kind of into voice, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That is my voice.
Like the style of your voice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
it's kind of like,
I don't know how I overcome it. I really don't. I just work on it until it sounds right. I have no tone in any of my pieces. It just happened by accident. Actually, no, I really don't. I mean, I just work on a poem until it sounds right. I really do. And it's like reading it out and I'm working on it. And like sometimes it feels like the rhythm is off, or sometimes it's like, I've got to find a different word that just suits. So like you said, like you're writing more of a science poem, what kind of words give that image? If you want something that's got hard edges, what kind of words give that? So, and I actually do with my poems, sometimes I start moving the lines around because I may have written them in a particular order, but that may not be the best order for them to be in. So I play with that as well. I mean, I don't know if that's for tone or just overall, the image of the poem.
Yeah. Well, and as somebody who has recently read quite a lot of your work, I will say your tone does tend towards like a magical, like a lightheartedness, but with an edge. It's like
beautiful.
Like that whole sacrifice kind of thing. Like,
Yeah,
we're playing
lighthearted edge.
Yeah, we're playing in the field of poppies, and now we're dead, kind of thing. Yeah. That's why I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're playing
the hem of every skirt has knives, right?
Yeah,
you might have got raped, like whatever. That's kind of interesting because it's like, I know you're going to ask like what our voice is, and I've never been able to figure out what my voice is. I need somebody else to tell me. So thank you. You told me.
You're welcome. Your voice is.
But the fans tell you, the people tell you what your voice, like your style, like you just being yourself.
Yeah.
And then other people tell you what your style is. The thing you got to watch out for with that, which happens to a lot of people, especially like filmmakers or artists, is that once you know what your style is and what you think people like about your style, you can end up becoming a caricature of yourself if you double down on it too much.
Pigeonholed.
Yeah, which is why I think it's so effective. I am getting on a soapbox now. When you look at artists like, say, David Bowie, and I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head, they reinvented themselves constantly. So they kept a fragment of their voice, kind of like a foundational voice the whole way through. We'll say David Bowie because I can't actually think of anybody off the top of my head. He kept a foundational voice. You knew that his voice was going to be probably for freedom, like the little guy, like, breaking out of your constraints, seeing the world from a different perspective. Whatever song, whatever stage he was in, that was a foundational voice or tone that he had, is that whole, be open to everything, think for yourself, like that kind of thing. But then he constantly changed his tone. So that was the voice. He changed the tone, like the Thin White Duke stage, and then the Golden Years stage, and the Ziggy Stardust stage, and which I think that's important. We do kind of get in a rut. When I was doing those chained haikus, I really got bored with them, and then I went through a stage where I felt like, ooh, that's what people expect. And so then I stopped writing them, wrote something completely different. But then in this Weird Tales one, I wound up going back to the chained haiku again because it felt like it called for it. So
Madonna, yeah. And I'd say like any
Yeah.
artist runs that risk of where, and even like actors where you can get pigeonholed and then you only ever do like the evil guy or the romantic lead. Like Matthew McConaughey wasn't a romantic lead for a long time until him and Sandra Bullock both managed to break that mold and move on to the more
He did
interesting
Dallas
roles.
Buyers Club, right? He did, right? Kind of
Yeah,
like,
and I don't remember which one broke Sandra out, but she broke past that because I mean she was doing all those kind of comedic romantic type movies. But yeah, it's the same. Like even an artist, like a painter, it's like, oh yeah, they do all those amazing, strange like vampire flowers, and then people only want you to do vampire flowers.
Yeah.
And and then it's like, how do you still have your style recognized, but move on from that to a different voice or tone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
I think like what you were saying about like David Bowie. You keep true to your voice because that's your perspective and how you see the world. But then you play around with tone. You just play around with different tones, but you maintain your voice as a foundation, like how David Bowie thing. I think that's the right way to do it, personally.
Yeah. That's even with Madonna, because Diane's brought up Madonna. You could say that her foundational voice, the thing that she carried through all the different stages, was kind of this whole, like a women empowerment thing. Like,
yes,
I don't care what you think. I'm individual. I'm sexy. I'm not ashamed of it. And if you're offended, back off. So you can kind of that sexy feminist through all of her work, but then she constantly changed the tone, the different look, the different styles, the different, and she evolved that way and stayed current. We have Matthew Lewis and All Creatures Great and Small is the romantic interest. Oh, Neville Longbottom. That's funny.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I was like, as the non-movie watcher, I'm like, I'm gonna go. Oh,
Neville Longbottom wasn't that Harry Potter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she's saying he also played Neville Longbottom.
Wow.
But I never saw All Creatures Great and Small. So, but I do know that's from. Now I can't think of his name. Harriet. James Harriet wrote. Wasn't that after James Harriet? Maybe he had a book called that. I used to read those. So, sharing your journey about how to find this personal voice or this foundational voice. Do you guys remember kind of when you started getting yours, and what were key influences and breakthrough moments? And I can start if you want, and give you guys a chance to think. All right, I'll start.
What did you say? I didn't hear you, Angela.
Can you share your journey in finding and refining your own personal voice, or what we're kind of saying your foundational voice as a poet? What were some of the key influences and breakthrough moments for you?
Well, like I said, I didn't know what my voice was, so I'm still breaking through.
Yeah, I kind of think that you wind up knowing what your voice is, because it's the thing that people say, oh, only you would have said that, or only you would have thought that, or, that's obviously from you. Like when people are saying that to you, that's where you can pinpoint, oh, that is my voice. And I believe we all do have one. I think I was lucky because I kind of had like one of those aha moments, which I have a lot of those. Kind of go through life clueless, and I go, aha, oh, okay, that's what that meant, and then I feel smarter. But mine was Brian Theowara was my mentor quite a few years ago now in the HWA. And we had worked together for a couple of months. And then he said, why don't you ever put your Asian perspective in your work? Like, why don't you never put you in your work? You have these stories that are written, technically this is a Gothic, or technically this is a science fiction, or technically, but there's no aspects of Angela in them. So look at who you are and put that in your story. And so I was like, that seems pretty wise advice. So I thought about it, and I had said, I'm not all Asian. I'm not 100% Asian, So I feel like that's not my story. And he said, but write what you are. And I was like, well, I'm in the middle. I'm parts of two worlds. So I can write about that liminal in-between space. And the other thing that probably would be a strong voice thing for me is that I really love technology. I'm almost hypnotized by it. Anything lit and shiny, and if it makes a noise, I'm there. You could actually steal me by going in a van and putting out like a little lighted worry thing, and I'd be like, okay, I'm coming, you know. So I started putting that in my work, and that story was my the first story I did that to was my first professional sale, which was Vanilla Rice, and it's technology and it's Asian, but the in between being both the worlds and everything. And that story, when every book that it's been in has won big awards. So not because of that story, but just as a side comment on that. So I think it's so important to get that personal voice and those aspects of ourselves in our work, because we don't really want to be like anybody else, do we? There's only one us. So, you know, there's only one David Bowie, there's only one Madonna, and then there's a hell of a lot of copies of both. You know, we want to be that original. So, all right, now you guys have had plenty of time to think.
Well, nobody ever tells me, you know, hey, Jamal, you got to put more black stuff in. I'm always doing that. So I'll probably do that a little too much. I mean, finding my voice. I think my voice comes from my I don't know what that background is. Is that me?
Oh, it could have been me. I've got cars.
That's not me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So for me, it's kind of like mine's more. I feel like my voice comes from my experiences, like growing up. I think a lot of our voices do, and it comes from our like perspective and our ultimate philosophy of the world. It's almost like something you can't hide. You might not even know it consciously, but I feel like it appears in your art. It's like comes from your subconscious mind. So it's kind of like for me, I see that it's definitely I'm definitely obsessed with who people are when they're suffering and who they need to be to get out of the suffering or to transmutate suffering into something beautiful. Because I definitely feel like all beauty comes from the transcendence of pain, you know, of some type. All goodness comes from that, in my opinion. So it definitely feels like my voice is usually like it's a testament to that. That's why I'm trying to testify to the readers that are reading my work. It's like you can overcome this darkness. In this darkness, there's hope. In this darkness, there's light. In this darkness, there's growth on the other side of it, right? In some
Yeah.
form of fashion. And my tone, though, um, I think I like to combine really serious stuff with humor, or like you know, the orthodox with the unorthodox. I think the mixing of paradoxes really excites me. I'm like obsessed with paradoxes. Um, so that's just more or less how I approach I feel like my voice, and this has come to me from people like you were saying, Angela, just basically telling me like, "Oh, you always do this," or "I noticed that you do these things," and stuff. So it's kind of like I can't see it because I'm me, or you might not be able to see it clearly because you're you. But then once you start to see it, you can't unsee it, and then it becomes like glaringly obvious. But I think within that there is an opportunity to actually start playing around with changing the tone, because once you see what your tone normally is, then you have the opportunity to kind of play around with other
Yeah.
forms and meanings. So that's how I feel.
I fully expect you to go get a Ziggy Stardust outfit now and some platform boots.
I just watched
and
Ziggy Stardust, the movie of the last concert on Monday. I watched the Ziggy Stardust. So I've got Bowie songs going through my head.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
You never have
Spiders
too much
from Mars.
Bowie.
No,
Yep.
you can never have too much Bowie. So, I mean, I've been told by other people that I write disturbing stuff, that I am unabashedly unashamed. Like I'll tackle topics, and I have written a lot of poems from the female perspective, like you could say feminist poetry, though I like to think of it more as egalitarian, but I do give voice to women in a lot of my poetry, and I present that perspective. So, like you said, Jamal, there's a fair number that come from personal experience, like my After the Apocalypse poem, It's Up for the Aurora. That, while that's a science fiction, well, science fiction, actually more ghost, I guess, supernatural, not really science fiction, though I think of it that way. That poem's about my experience, and I just, put a different veneer on it. And so I think that's, again, it's like looking at something like you were saying, like paradoxes. For me, it's like taking something and maybe twisting it darker, putting
Yeah.
a different darker spin on it. Like I will kind of take things like, I don't write a lot of stuff that's really hopeful. And I have this collection of short stories that's sci-fi, body horror, apocalyptic fiction. And because each story references a Greek myth, my theme is that every story actually deals with death, but every story also has a little glimmer of hope. Some is bigger, some is smaller. And that's partly because I do write a lot of dark stuff. So it's like, but once in a while, I'll put some hope in there. So I guess that is part of my voice.
It. Oh, sorry, yes. that was my voice.
Yes, I hear Angela's voice at night in the dark.
But I will say, Colleen, that I really love your work. And something I really notice in your work, just my opinion from reading you a lot, is that you really combine. I like how you find the reality in folklore or fairy tales, how you make them like almost metaphors for the darkness in real life, and how you combine those two together. It's like, it's almost like a documentary told through like elves or the forest or Little Red Riding Hood or Rapunzel, but you're talking about real everyday shit. But it's
absolutely,
like it's really great.
Yes, and it's like I will use that metaphor, but to talk about social issues. Like a lot of my poems are like social commentary. Like the one in On Spec, they each pursue beauty, which is science fiction body horror. So Angela, you should love that. But it's all social commentary. It's about how and
You're very much an activist.
Yes, I do use the activism in my poems. So I guess that is part of my voice, is that I will, there is a message often in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I've noticed, I thought this was Edgar Allan Poe. Here's an important thing. Look at this guy. What mustache is that? That's not Edgar Allan Poe. That's Salvador Dali. But did he dress like this, or is that Edgar's clothing? Like, did he steal it from Edgar?
I kind of think that's just a villain. Like, that's just a villain, a general villain is how I think of it.
He's also got some disc in the back of his head, so I think he's being controlled. This is me.
Yeah, Pixie says, Colleen updates transformations by Anne Sexton.
That might be something that somebody wrote about my poems. Like, that might have been something that, like, one of the blurbs was. I don't even remember.
All right. So do you guys change your tone and voice for your intended audience or reader impact? And I will say, I'm going to say we all do for sales. You get something, Weird Tales asks you to do something, or, cozy cosmic horror that I'm so excited to write from Underland Press. That call is for cozy cosmic horror. What are you going to do? You have to change. You can change the tone to a point. You can change your voice to a point. There's still going to be aspects of you coming through, but you do change it to sell. I'm going to say, outside of obviously trying to fit into a call, do you guys change for your audience? Snidely Whiplash.
I definitely do. I definitely do. Because sometimes I write things specifically for urban Black audience, and I'll use certain language. At last class, I was saying don't use that language. I'll use that language, and they'll love the fact that I'm using that language
Did we say that?
because I'm
Did
talking
we?
to a specific.
Yeah. Did we
No,
say
no, it
don't
was
use that
about like
language?
curse words and certain extra words
Oh,
and things.
yeah. I think
But
it wasn't don't
sometimes,
use it, but use
depending,
it
depend,
sparingly at times for the power.
yeah, yeah. You don't want to be gratuitous, right? Like,
Mm.
and like I was saying, like if you're talking to a certain group and you're from that group, there's certain things you could be more lenient with your language and stuff like that. So you can kind of play with tone a little more if you're trying to get a valid point across. So
Yeah.
that's so I definitely play around with language in that way. When I'm talking to like my urban people like my people from where I come from. And when I'm doing more like fantastical things, I really like to write. Like you were saying earlier, Angela, like if you're writing science fiction, you get into a certain science fiction mind. It's like a inexplicable feeling to sci-fi or to fantasy, like or to magical realism. That you kind of feel it. You play like Colleen was saying, you play around with it until you find it. So
Hmm.
the simple answer is yes, I do. I have to be a chameleon in a sense where my voice stays the same, but my tone changes constantly.
Hmm.
See, and I'm going to say I don't because I'm I may write to a theme, as in like if I'm going to write for Weird Tales or I was going to write to Asimov's. Um, Maybe this is why I've never been in Asimov's. but I'm more like writing, but it's like say there's a theme for an anthology or whatever. I would write to that theme, but I'm still going to write it in my voice. So I don't think I'm shifting it that much. Um, so maybe I'm saying the same thing as Jamal, but just from the other side. But I feel that I don't change what I'm writing. But I may have a voice just like you have a character in the story. I may have
Hmm.
a voice for a poem, but my voice, I don't think I shift that much. What about
Hmm.
you, Angela?
I think I'm probably I can't help but be that depressing person. So never come to me for help if you want to be cheered up, because I will say something like, "Oh, you should go to a graveyard and eat cake," because when you look at everybody who doesn't have a chance anymore, it'll make you feel like peppier. And I have found that that is not cheer people up. Cheers me up, but not everybody. Um, I mean, so everything that I do, right, will tend to have that. The cosmic, cozy horror story that I'm supposed to write, which is going to be completely like anything I've ever done. It's going to be about Anubis falling in love with one of the Lovecraftian gods. And,
Yeah,
because that's the cozy part. So I still have to have the death in there a little bit. Um, when
I think you
I,
should
hmm?
go ahead. Sorry, I
Oh,
interrupted you. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say the one time that I really experienced this in the maybe negative way was it was the first open mic kind of thing I was doing, and it was a contest. And I did not realize that the audience was Christian, like, you know, like
Like
very
Christian,
devout
Christian.
Christian, yes. And my story was about a babysitter who winds up being haunted and hanging herself. It's called The Braid, and it's about the little girl is like making funny faces, and the babysitter says, "Oh, why are you making funny faces?" And she said, I'm mimicking the woman with the braid. And then the babysitter thinks she's playing a game. And so she's like, "Oh, you want me to braid your hair like hers?" And the girl says, "Oh, no, the braid's around her neck." So what she's looking at is a ghost that hung itself. And then the babysitter gets haunted and also kills herself. And I read this out loud to an
Oh,
audience. Huh? What'd you say, Jamal?
it's a Pixar film. I said
Is
it's a
it?
Pixar movie.
Oh, is it? Like for real? Oh, okay. You see this. It's like best film ever. But so as I'm reading this is where I'm like, why we do want to kind of match our audience or our readers or, the editor that we're selling to. Because as I'm reading this and I'm a new green reader, I've never really performed read before. And I hear people in the audience going, "Oh my God, oh, that's horrible." And I'm kind of going, do they mean my writing or do they mean what I'm reading? And I just kept going. And then afterwards I found out it was the wrong audience for me. I still
All
won
that
third
suicide.
place.
Damn
Yeah.
souls.
I did win third place though, and I kept that little trophy. That was probably better to me than the Stoker because it was like I read horror to a Christian audience and I wasn't burned.
Christianity is full of horror though. Christianity is full of horror though. You gotta read the Bible is probably the oldest horror book there is.
It is absolutely. Hello, Dally. To the puppet wanted it to be Poe. We can pretend it's Poe.
I thought it was Poe, but now I'm thinking back to the friend that gave it to me, and it was stuffed in part of a angel body, and that sounds very Dally-esque. So
maybe it's the devil. Then he does have the devilish, like the traditional.
Dally would have loved that. And Dally was kind of like one of my art gods when I was in art college. So, hello, Dally. You look swell, Dally.
If anybody feels like this has not stayed on track today, I blame Colleen.
It's the insects in my brain pan, I tell you. Not spiders, other insects. Ones with long legs that scrape and whisper against each other.
All right, I think we have time for one final question, and I do thank everybody for enduring with us today. I think pretty much everybody is boiling hot in the United States right now, from what I'm hearing. So this is a good question for, global warming isn't real.
Not in the sea where we're roasting. Like
Al Gore is like,
see what's going on. So yeah, don't even. I classic me. I want to talk to you about the doomsday clock.
But please, let's not. I'm going to go and I'll have to drink a whole bottle of wine afterwards if you do.
I will. This is why Colleen can only take 3 weeks of me.
Well, I had a job, but
we're all going to die. It's probably a sun flare coming right for us.
Are you kidding? I'm going to come and retire and live with you, and you'll never get rid of me. I'll be your ghost in your attic.
Okay. Well, we don't really have an attic, but
it's true. I'll be the termite.
We do.
Poached mermaids. I like that, Pixie. Poached mermaids. I actually have a little short about kind of like a poached mermaid short. I like mermaids. I still don't have my mermaid tattoo, but I like mermaids.
Well, this is
even though they're nasty.
Challenge. By next class, you'll have your mermaid tattoo. I challenge you.
No, can't get it that fast. I have to find the right artist.
All right, final question. And this is, I think, a good one for all of us. How does cultural context influence the tone in poetry? And can you share examples from your own work or other work that you might be familiar with of how tone can be perceived differently across various cultures and communities?
Why, yes, I can. I can read my poem in On Spec that I've been talking about, which is all about cultural context. And I'll read it. They each pursued beauty. The man of color chose bleaches, not to make him white, but a more acceptable shade of brown, muscle implants, penis stretching so he could meet the expectations of his race. The white woman chose breast implants, lipo-sucking fat that gave her boys' hips, Botox until she resembled a doll, inflated, so she could meet the expectations of her gender. The alien changed course, arrived on lightweight contrails after digesting media blipping across the galaxy, so it could choose them, archetypes to meet its expectations. Jointed limbs, protruding pieces intrigued its viscosity, its undulant, pincered appendages extracted pulsing organs, lacy veins, bones tinged pink as sensory buds tasted, prodded. Impervious to the man and woman shrieks, it extruded epidermis, epithelial fat, popped fingers, jaws, Eyes severed their tongues to play red-trailed slug races. It occasionally numbed them with fluids siphoned from necrotic vegetative spikes. Everything it removed, it exchanged, transplanted, or melded, a not wholly unpleasant feeling that shivered them akin to orgasm. What it didn't do was kill them, though they begged often for an end. Flesh grown pale and gray from lack of lifeblood still thrived in nutrient baths. In the sterile theater, it atomized their augmentations, spritzed with ozone and an unknown darksome fuss, where their living body parts were displayed before them an otherworldly art show. The alien's three-faceted eyes watched incessantly as it recorded, ululating on some crystalline device, doing mix and match as it puzzled their components. Eventually, it solved their mysteries and grew bored. Reassembled, minds scarred from intimate incursions, they were deposited amongst lowing Holsteins. Docile-eyed creatures, the man and woman fell birth naked upon their knees, patting grass, inhaling cow patty air. They reveled in warm breezes sliding over their flesh, only dimly reminiscent of that foreign, probing limb. The man and woman looked upon what that alien thrill-seeker wrought. 2 arms, 2 legs, each a nose and pair of eyes, one brown, one blue. They more or less resembled people. Purged of enhancements, now skin-ridged, mottled brown and white, garden fresh they embraced, weeping, loving the pasture, the simple air, and the beauty of their new human forms. Sorry, I should probably have given a content warning on that one.
I was just thinking as you were reading, I don't think we've said penis and orgasm this many times in a single class.
Yeah. So they're total cultural context, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was phenomenal. I love that. I love that one. That was phenomenal.
Yeah.
That was really good.
That was good. Yeah. So that really does go into the whole cultural context of voice and sorry, I'm still going over the poem in my head.
Yeah.
So.
That's amazing. That was really amazing. Amazing visuals, tone, the way it almost had an inbuilt narrative too, and it was amazing actually. It'll make like an amazing short film.
Well, I'll option it to you if you want. But with that, it was like there's the whole thing like the almost cliche alien probe, right? Like people being abducted and probed, but it was like why would an alien do this? And like this is like taking it to the extreme, but also which people would it choose? What was it? What's it looking for? What does it hear and absorb from our culture?
Yeah, exactly. Which kind of goes into a whole, I mean, there could be a whole class on just that and how the media and culture tells us what we're supposed to look like and who we're supposed to be. But nobody are those things. Yeah.
Yeah. What makes
normal
us smart,
is not
intelligent,
normal.
Yeah.
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 So I think we're getting a lot better with that. These generations, like the end of these generations, we're getting a lot better with
People are more aware. They're more aware. There's more empathy and compassion around that.
And also that like the influence that can be done. And like even if you look at models now, we have a range of models, tall, thin, larger, smaller, different skin colors, people who may have different pigmentations. And I think, that's trying to break the anorexic thin model that then everybody thinks they have to be, and then influences Hollywood and musicians as well.
I always wondered who that represented because
Not
people
most
don't
of
look
us.
like that.
No, it just gives us eating disorders. It just gives us eating disorders. That's all.
Yeah, I will say that's like a very American mindset, and I didn't realize it until the first time I left America. And the rest of the world just doesn't care like we do. It's
and like
it's
in Brazil,
crazy.
seeing the storefronts with the mannequins of like the average size mannequin, but the larger female mannequin, and like they're side by side. It's not like clothes to fit only one size, and it's like, yeah, we're all different sizes and shapes.
Yeah. Yep.
Now we're getting off on a tangent.
We are, and we are over our
Shapes in
time.
Brazil. Brazil.
What'd you say?
No, I'll just say I appreciate the shapes in Brazil. I appreciate the shapes in Brazil. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're not going to read too much into that, Jamal. All the things that I would say right now, I'm just not gonna, because we're 5 minutes over and I don't want to get myself in trouble. Thank you guys for being here today and for watching us. Oh, and I'm supposed to, Max couldn't be with us today because he had a HWA director important thing that happened at the same time that they needed to take care of. So that is why he's not here, but he did tell me to say hi to everybody and put in his 2 cents. So that was his 2 cents.
To write a poem that explores a particular tone or voice.
Yep. And then next week, and I'm still working, I've still got a few of my critiques left to do. So if anybody is waiting on a critique from me, that is coming tonight.
That's what I'm doing too. Because a whole bunch of poems came in. I think some late, maybe some people were at Nikon or whatever.
Yeah, there's been so many things going on for summer, I think. So next week we're going to be writing from personal experience. So we've kind of gotten through some of the tougher ones. Now we're going to be talking about personal experience.
Jamal, did you just do this?
I was tabbed out looking at the thing. I missed it.
He kind of did a little.
So thank you everybody for being here. We miss you, Max. I know he's going to come back and watch all of this.
Come to the sea, Max. Come to the sea.
Thank you, Colleen.
Nevermore, Max. Nevermore. In the
bringing your finger puppet. Don't hear any sarcasm. No, I'm not being sarcastic. Why? Is it my tone?
I'll bring Cecily the big banana slug back for next week. She's having a break.
But I guess that's it for now. We'll see you guys next week, and going on to the next lesson. This is flying by. Bye, everybody.